Good afternoon and namaskar to each one present here. We extend a very warm welcome on behalf of Amity Business School family. We thank you for taking out time and joining us virtually for the seventh and final session of the Mega International Lecture Series, which is envisioned as a curtain raiser to the main event. The Global Leadership Research Conference 2022 is all set to commence next week. In this series, we bear witness to a set of international lectures by academic stalwarts who are masters of their field. After a stellar opening and 6 illuminary sessions from our academic stalwarts who shared their fathomless knowledge and acumen to enlighten all present. We would like to take this opportunity to thank our honorable founder, President Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, our Chancellor and President Dr. Atul K. Chauhan, Vice Chancellor Professor Dr. Balwinder Shukla ma'am, who presented with us the opportunity and platform to host this grand event. We would like to extend a very warm welcome to Dean of Faculty Management Studies, Director and Head of Amity Business School, Professor Dr. Sanjeev Bansal sir. Now, let's take a brief look back at the journey so far. Building on that, today, joining with us the renowned academic, Dr. Simon M. Smith, Principal Lecturer, Business Management and Enterprise, Oxford Brookes University, United Kingdom. Now, we would invite Director, Dean and Head of Amity Business School, Professor Dr. Sanjeev Bansal sir, to welcome our esteemed guests with the sapling as a token of our culture here at Amity, an expression of our gratitude.
Welcome, Dr. Smith, and I wish that very soon you would be visiting India and we should be in a position to give you, hand over this sapling in the physical mode. Thank you so very much for being there again.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to request Professor Dr. Anupama Rajesh ma'am, Head of Internationalization Cell and Professor at Amity Business School, to introduce Dr. Simon to the audience. Ma'am.
It's my absolute pleasure and honor. Ashna, can we have the slide on Professor Simon's? Yes. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce to the gathering Professor Dr. Simon M. Smith. He's a principal lecturer at Oxford Brookes University, Business Management and Enterprise. But more importantly, a very valued friend, partner, and a very, very respected member of the ABS Parivar. Simon, Parivar means family. Now you're very much a part of our family. Going on, the formal introduction. Dr. Simon M. Smith is Principal Lecturer in Business Management and Enterprise. He joined Oxford Brookes University in August 2021. He works closely with program leads, research area leads, and associate deans to help manage both staff and students. Simon teaches and researches across a range of subject areas and specialization. Simon started his career in higher education in 2006 and has led and managed numerous programs. Simon teaches and has taught across a large number of subject areas embracing HRM, leadership, international businesses, marketing, and research methods. He has previously been a program director for a suite of programs as well as program leader for numerous courses, including DBA, MBA, and related programs across business management, business administration, and international business. Simon also has experience teaching in China, Brunei, Germany, Spain, Cyprus, and the Czech Republic. He has had many prestigious awards and accolades. For the Outstanding Lecturer in 2021, the Amity Excellence Award, the Lecturer of the Year winner, the highly commended paper for Employee Relations 2014, and the Best Reviewer Award in the 7th Annual Euromed Academy of Business Conference. I could go on, but then I would be stealing too much of time. So hence, I would request Professor Dr. Simon M. Smith to please address the gathering and share his immense knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the welcome. An absolute pleasure to be here. I'm going to share my screen and my slides, if that's okay, before kind of get going. Screen moved, there we go. I apologise in advance. My head's going to do a bit of left and right because I'm looking at kind of your faces on my screen in front of me, but I've got my content on a different screen to the right of me. I think you've said a lot about me, which is great. I think this presentation today, I'm hoping is going to be something highly unique. And that's what I always intentionally try to bring when I do these kind of guest lectures, is that you hear something that you've not heard before. And this is something I've got a few things in review, a few papers in review connected to the topic of, well, I do lots on paradox, but connected to the hidden curriculum and sort of these impacts on modern leadership, alternative leadership. So this is all kind of stuff that's in my mind at the moment, a really sort of a hot of my thoughts and sort of projects and things that are going on. All right, let's see if we can get my, there we go. So I hope you can see these slides, by the way. Just a nod and a panel if you can see it.
We can see it.
That's good, good to know. So basically my session will cover sort of reflecting on educational delivery. There's going to be a few slants to what I talk about. So I'm going to be highly critical of the educational system. I'm including myself in this. And then I'm going to think about paradox theory called organizational ambidexterity and feed that in somehow. And then on top of that, I'm going to talk about leadership and how leadership as a business topic area feeds into all of these aspects, all with the Sustainable Development Goals in mind. Yeah, I think I'll go to my next slide to explain. And I apologise, my voice has been a bit funny for a few days. It will come and go as I speak. So a little bit about me, because I think it's really important. I think you highlight some very important histories, because I wasn't always this way. I wasn't always so passionate about things like sustainability. That has come through time, effort, experience. And you highlighted that I've been at Oxford Brookes. I'm coming up to 6 months at Oxford Brookes. It's been a roller coaster ride since changing jobs. This is my 5th UK university. I don't like changing job. I've been trying to plant seeds and sort of work my way forward within my career, but the change came and the change in emphasis came. And this how I got here is on a very long, windy road, I think is the best way to explain it. But I picked up lots about sustainability in my last university, and I'm driving that forward here in my new job. I wanted to highlight the sort of the principal lecture a bit, because I'm focusing on leadership because I line manage a lot of people in my new role. And I think it's getting close to 40 people that I line manage on a personal basis, which is quite a shift from the last job role that I had, but one that's enjoyable, that comes with lots of challenges. I've recently become this co-director of the Centre for Business, Society and Global Challenges, which is an echo of previous experience running research centres. And this week we're having conversations, and I'm really pushing this SDG agenda right through the heart and the core of what we do, because it's something that I think we could do more of. So that kind of explains why it really is hot in my mind, not only within my business, within what I do, but within the wider world as well. We're doing a lot of research on SMEs, and with a particular focus on Oxfordshire at the moment, but with links to Hampshire, which is where I live. and they're important because I think I've kind of moved my emphasis away from the MNCs and coming more towards the smaller businesses that need help and need these supports. And I feel, I don't know if it's a reward thing, more personal reward about helping SMEs, but it's where my work is at the moment. My teaching experiences are all over the place, I think is a good way to word it. So now I'm back to teaching HRM, and I teach HRM and some leadership and a few other bits and bobs. In my previous role, I taught a lot of leadership. In the role before that, I taught a lot of international business, and so on and so forth. So if the way I speak is very cross-disciplinary, it's on purpose and it's intentional, and I don't kind of apologize for it. So it will feel like I'm swinging from topic to topic. Very passionate about paradox. So the more and more I research about paradox and paradox theory, the more and more I am convinced that that is a situation, a position that we need to address, and it has become my disposition. I am very critical of other research, especially through focusing on paradoxical realities, is what I like to phrase it as. So it makes it very difficult. I do lots of research related to this. A lot of it is to do with SDGs, and a lot of it is to do, as the next slide will show, the principles of responsible management education. Now, I'm doing two things at once in this particular slide. Responsible management education and the hidden curriculum are two very different things. So PRIME is a wonderful sort of model United Nations supported initiative to try and enhance sustainability of business schools in particular. I've been connected to this in this job and my last job in particular. It's hoping it's going to transform the hearts and minds of the future leaders that are going to go out into the bigger world, and they will be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and manage climate action and manage all those problems we have in society that are there. There is a ginormous, however, despite these efforts, there still remains a hidden curriculum. And this is something that I've got a few papers that are in review at the moment. And so these are not my words regarding the domination of neoliberalistic capitalistic virtues within higher education delivery. It's something I live and breathe on a daily basis. It's something where I've come up with a phrase, are we irresponsible in delivering responsible management education? It is not a statement, it is a question. It's a question to say, we need to take a step back, we need to think about things, and are we really pushing towards the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals? And the reason I say that is because capitalism is a humongous part of society, making profits, buying lots of great things, materialism, consumerism. These are natural norms within society, incredibly difficult to change. So difficult that it's very difficult not to teach towards as well. Because if we want to teach our graduates to be successful in making profits, it's normally number one, saving the planet is lower down the list in order of priorities. Now, I could stand and I could be an activist, I could say the priority needs to be world saving number one and profit down the list. I've learnt through the situation, however, that it's not as easy as prioritizing the list. It is just simply paradoxical, and that it's in conflict all the time. And it's about, for me, it's about managing the conflict, which means I don't think we should do away with teaching people about how to make a profit in business and be successful. It should be at the same time and in conjoining with saving the planet, dealing with sustainable issues, and all those issues that are within the Sustainable Development Goals. I make it sound easy, incredibly tough task to do. And whether we like it or not, I said I was going to be critically reflective of education myself in general, whether it is conscious or unconscious. There is an argument that business learning is dominated by profiteering over the management of even people or planet. There's lots of research I've read around this, and I don't take it as a sort of an insult of my own approaches. I take it as an opportunity to think, okay, let's take a step back. What am I talking about when I talk about business? What am I delivering? What is the system built around? What is the system doing? What is the university doing? What do they expect me to do? What do they expect us to do? Now, of course, I mentioned I do a lot more line managing now. So I manage a large group. So now I've got the responsibility to do that on a grand scale of having that debate across my entire subject area. So I am a principal lecturer and a leader within the subject area of business and management. It doesn't stop there, of course. I need to echo these reflections and thoughts across the other subject areas and across the business school. But I've only been there for less than 6 months. But these are transitions, these are actions. And it's very hard to debate because the first reason why it's very difficult to talk about, people don't like criticism of their own practices. I've learned to accept it, thankfully. And then my mind is open and it's willing to say, okay, perhaps I will change. Okay, I will go away and I'll think about how I could deliver something in a different way. And I've had the debate both ways. I've had the argument that sounds very convincing of why we should focus on profit. And I've had the other one, of course, about why we should focus on sustainability. But this hidden curriculum, where it's almost a norm, it's a societal thing where it's not even spoken about, it's just an expectation that everybody who goes to a business school learns about maximizing profits. It's never really spoken about. Sustainability is a separate subject. That's the worrying part about the delivery. So that's taken a step back. So I'm hoping that people who might listen to these words sit in any class and they just take that kind of moment where you just lean back and you just say, okay, what does this mean for sustainable development practices? What does this mean for achieving sustainable development goals? And really delve into the sort of conversations. Remember, they're convincing. Capitalism has survived such a long time for a reason, because it's the system that's worked best over time. Yet it is flawed and it is riddled with problems and all kinds of things. And this is despite a lot of pressure on business schools to change and respond to crises and the SDGs. This profit first mindset is embedded and it's in the educational outcomes. I mean, if we all went away and we looked at our learning outcomes of our programs and modules, it'd be interesting to see what our wording looks like and to critique ourselves against sort of, well, I would say against the paradoxical theory that I'm about to present, because that gives us a chance to use it as a lens rather than a sense of shaming or anything like this, because my work is about changing the mindset through a wanting to be better, not because anything is wrong or anything is too complicated to fix or whatever it might be. I steer well away from the element of activism for SDGs through shaming people into change. I don't think it works. I don't think it's very effective. If you want to get everybody on board, it needs to become a societal norm, just like making a profit is. And that's where my work is moving towards, that idea of getting everybody naturally on board. It's a very difficult fix though. Yes, and you've kind of got the arguments here about steering students towards sort of consumerism, materialism and all the other kind of aspects. Glasgow is a great researcher. She really highlights the kind of the issues, and that's in every university anywhere in the world we'll have our own little idiosyncratic hidden curriculum aspects that we may or may not know about. But I found that just that phrase hidden curriculum has really opened my mind up for validation events, new degrees, all these kind of things. So I'm coming in with that extra level of mindset to think, okay, let's instead of kind of ticking the boxes, filling everything, will this make money? Will we get students on board for this? You know, is there something else that could feed into there? And of course, it demands critical reflexivity, which is not easy to do. To take a step back and criticise ourselves first and then potentially criticise others, which shouldn't come across as that. It should be a chance to develop. It's a leadership nightmare is what I'll say. It's very difficult. We need to change managers, people on the front line, and so on and so forth. It's one of the greatest challenges that we could have in education and other organisations. So I want to introduce this idea of paradoxical thinking and the traditions and norms, and the kind of the reason why profiteering is so successful. I mean, it should be obvious. We look for the ultimate answer. We don't like complexity. We don't like ambiguity. We don't like contradiction. We don't like things that don't make sense very easily. I'm generalising society, by the way. I'm not generalising business schools here. This is organisations. And it's a very simplified view. But people are drawn towards linear, positivistic, and therefore limited mindsets because it works better. It's easier to do. And there are incredibly successful organisations that have this mindset. I put McDonald's, Amazon, IKEA, but the list is humongous, absolutely humongous. And they're incredibly successful. And there's a great simplicity in their efficiency and all these other kind of aspects they have to their business. And it makes a lot of money. So it's very desirable to a lot of people. So it makes sense. So these are the normative stances. That's what we're fighting against. Success. We're fighting against profit, success, and boosting people's lives. So it should sound strange when I say that. But we have got this cliche of knowledge is power. What more could we do? And I've worded it in a very particular way to say, what more could we do? We understand and interpret the complex nature of realities. Now, I've taught on doctoral programs. I've led DBA programs at doctoral level. And that is an incredibly hard conversation to have over a 5-year period, never mind a day-to-day conversation or something like that. And you watch people's minds change over a long period of time. But it takes a lot of input, a lot of reflection, and a lot of movement in the way that they think and feel about things. And some people are slower and faster than others. You've got normative leadership. I've only put 2 leadership styles in here. The very basics, the backbone of leadership classes. I don't think I've ever taught a leadership class without these 2 theories in. A leadership module without these 2 theories in. It would seem very strange not to have them. They're the most commonly spoken about. I would argue that in assessments I've marked, they're the most commonly used as well, because they're nice to latch onto. So there's always this idea that the transactional leader links to organisations more so like McDonald's and Amazon and so on and so forth, because there's lots of efficiency. It's not about emotion. There's no kind of emotional contract and so on and so forth. They get business done. It's task orientated. And that's one section. And then the other section is this transformational leader, which may or may not suit certain industries. And it's about looking after your people. It's got strange phrases like pride, faith, and respect. Who knows how to measure any of that in an organisation? It's very difficult to do. But teaching, delegating, coaching, building skills. And that seems to be the other side. And I've put there the responsible leader question mark. Transformational leadership is not built for responsible leadership. The more years that go by, the more I realise it is an incredibly inferior model to apply to responsible leadership. Previously, I've used it as a stepping stone to responsible leadership. Now, totally disengaged, I push the older theories to one side and say, right, that's your bread and butter of leadership. You'll be expected to act in these particular ways at one stage or another, but forget them. Let's move to a different way. And I've got that in here somewhere. But first, the limitations of these normative approaches. Restricted to the building blocks of leadership. Now, I mentioned that I've taught leadership quite a lot. It would be strange if I didn't teach the history and the basics. And a lot of people stop at the building blocks, which is a shame. But lots of programs are built in this kind of way. There's so many leadership theories that they kind of cover a lot of the older theories and then stop. And they might do a little bit about alternatives in a modern day context, which really is missing. The more I teach it, the more that I condense the traditional and move into the alternative very early. That's my own kind of approach to dealing with it. And I've always been quite scared to do it with undergrad students because I think it's too complicated too soon. But actually, the feedback has been very positive about, wow, I'm so happy to get away from the basics. I'm so happy to learn about something in a different way. That's been the general kind of thing. So other people hate it. Other people hate the philosophical kind of thinking that's related to it. I think in general, the move has been quite positive. These theories build many grand assumptions, which are problematic. They don't really deal with complexity very well. It's very difficult to classify and measure leaders' performance, yet we still try, and we have many potential frameworks and models to do this. And then, just to add to the complexity of it, and we talked about it before the presentation started, Anna, which is the what about COVID-19? It's revolutionised what business is doing in lots of negative ways and a few positive ways. That's my take on it. And did we ever learn the lessons from the financial crash that happened 2007, 2008? Did we really learn the lessons from that when we hit COVID-19? Or did we repeat some of those kind of mistakes? And the kind of things I'm talking about are when businesses move to survival mode and they cut costs, and there's heavy amount of redundancies, and there's a lot of stripping down of staff, because staff are the most expensive things. They're first targeted, all very transactional leadership style. There is a reverting to that kind of form very often in organisations. Very difficult to counter. So how on earth can we focus on things like sustainable development goals and responsible management if when the chips are down and we hit a huge problem, we switch back to the primary instinct mode, which is something more akin to transactional leadership, which I would argue is not very amenable to something like responsible leadership, unfortunately. So, my paradox theory. So I hope you're still with me. There's a lot going on in this presentation. I've got a lot of levels, a lot of different things going on. So I do a lot of papers, a lot of talking about organisational ambidexterity. I like to call it a paradox theory, but it's complicated. It's a paradox, a theory pertaining to paradox. It can be used to discuss paradox. There are many pieces of research out there that do not discuss ambidexterity, organisational ambidexterity, as a paradoxical theory. They use wording like, so you'll see that first line, it says it involves two polar opposites, exploitation and exploration. A lot of researchers, and I mean a lot of researchers, refer to it as a balancing between the two. And I go back to one of my earlier slides where I said we have linear thinking, normative thinking, borderline managerialist thinking. When it's simple and easy to count, the word balancing is the nicer one to think about. But I don't like the simplicity. It simplifies the theory way too much. And if I wanted to use a really old school theory like Michael Porter, who argues that the two best ways, this sort of the manufacturing 80s, 90s position, that you either are the cost leader or you are a differentiation leader. And those are the two bits. You could argue this is the two polar opposites. And whether it's his exact words or not, but Michael Porter said something along the lines of, if you become stuck in the middle, business will fail. Now, those researchers that are saying we need to balance these two opposites sounds a lot like, to me, Michael Porter saying we're going to get stuck in the middle. We're not going to do either very well, and our competition will crush us. That's what it sounds like to me. So I don't enjoy that debate. I like the paradox theory in a very different way. It's the management of the paradox. And I will come to the way that is managed. I think it's in the next slide, but I'll come to it shortly. So it's paradoxical if an organisation attempts both. I would argue we do it all the time. I mentioned COVID-19, I mentioned the financial crash. When we shift emphasis, we're changing practice and we're changing styles constantly. That's the large scale one. When we move to something that's more like transactional leadership, we're going much more, as I will explain, that's much more like exploitative approaches, and so on and so forth. Significantly, there is a body of literature that's becoming necessary for short-term survival and sustained success. So I'm already saying that people are quite ambidextrous when it becomes survival mode, whether they know it or not, and whether they're very good at it or not. So that's another way to think about it. But the long-term success, so when we shift to things like stripping out costs and potentially destroying our psychological contract with our staff, that is not very good for long-term success. That's the paradoxical situation introduced, and it comes with all kinds of complexities. And as I mentioned, I would argue that organisations are quite ambidextrous, whether knowing it or not. That is traditional business. I've put the question at the bottom, then what about sustainable development goals? Because sustainable development goals and organisational ambidexterity, they don't go together. I have put them together, but it is not a symbiotic relationship. It is the round peg in the square hole, to say the very old phrase. It is something that does not fit very well. It is something I've been spending years trying to flesh out and understand myself, how to apply this theory to the situation of something simplified like people versus profit versus people versus planet, as these are two polar opposites. Could be just profit versus people. I'm putting versus planet on the end, which is a third kind of issue, almost a trichotomy instead of a dichotomy. So it becomes so much more complicated, and I'm still finding within my research that I'm trying to make full sense of this. Super important as a lens for what is being spoken about. So to explain the theory, so exploitative approaches, it's important to realise that the word exploitation is not in its true sense. So it's not about, for example, exploiting staff with low wages or anything like this. The word is not used in that way for this theory. The exploitative is focused on things like increasing efficiency, refinement, and expanding on generally what is known to the organisation and the marketplace. It's a sense of almost that linear simplicity. Transactional leadership can be mapped over here. McDonaldization is a great example of it. It's not about exploiting people in a negative way. Exploitative approaches can be exceedingly positive, even though the word is unusual. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. And we can certainly see a need for such approaches during the world pandemic. So I'm not surprised that many organisations are using what I would argue to be exploitative approaches at a time when they need to survive. I will highlight retail, hospitality as key industries there. Key industries that have collapsed, fallen, are in an appalling state of disrepair and will never be the same again, I don't think. So quite understandably, they have switched to approaches that are more akin to something like this. And that's me saying I understand a lot of the arguments of why these organisations may be less interested in things like responsible leadership and sustainable development goals, because if you've not got a business to come back to the following week, I think it's a good argument to say, well, what is the point? What is the point whatsoever? On the other hand, the other side of this polar opposite, we've got the explorative approaches, which sounds very positive, but again, it's similar to the other word. It's just a way to label the approaches. This focus on new knowledge, getting away from existing knowledge, so finding new ways to do things. That's where the echo to sustainable development goals fits for me, because we need to find a new way to do things for it to work, to achieve the sustainable development goals. Other key words like experimentation, flexibility, innovation, divergent thinking. You started thinking you could connect things like entrepreneurial business, enterprise, that kind of innovation management could feed in quite easily here. Comparisons can be made to transformational leadership as a classical leadership theory, because coaching, mentoring, and teaching might be a way to move away from existing knowledge into new skills, new knowledge. But as I will mention, that comes with limitations when it comes to responsible leadership. And we could argue a need for this during the current, could we argue a need for this during the current world pandemic? Absolutely. Because if, for example, when we were in lockdown, Again, I would argue that many organisations did this. They weren't just all exploitative. Lots of them were explorative because they learnt how to adapt. They became agile. They shift. Maybe the classic example is shifting face-to-face business to online business and surviving in a different way. And it wasn't efficiency. It was learning. It was skills and building into a new way of thinking. So that's why I'm coming back to that argument that many organisations are actually ambidextrous without even knowing it. I could also argue one step further that perhaps they're doing a bit of both. So, for example, moving your business online creates efficiency because you've not got the overheads of a building and so on and so forth, but you are learning in an explorative way. You're innovating on how to get your products to the customers. That's an ambidextrous way of conducting business, perhaps essential this day and age. Now, I said I'll come back to this phrase. So for me, it's not about balancing the two. You don't balance exploitation and exploration. You make it work in tandem. This is a quote from my own work. But I use this phrase, and I use this phrase a lot. And it makes no sense. It is an oxymoron, if you want to say, and it is perhaps, if you wanted to say in a physical sense, impossible, but it's the one that makes most sense to me. So I've used the phrase, two polar opposites working paradoxically in tandem. To reword it, what I'm trying to say is we maximize both ends. We learn how to make the best of both ends. So if I go back to Michael Porter, differentiation, cost leadership, we have to do both. Now, people can say that is an impossibility. And you'll see at the bottom of this slide, I always use Netflix as my primary example, because it's very rare that people don't know who Netflix is and what they do and have some kind of experience with them. There are lots of companies that are ambidextrous, but Netflix is the easiest for me to talk about. And it's one, again, I use in my research. And it's because that one of their genius about their business models is they don't have a very incredibly high subscription rate for what they do, but they have a very high quality streaming process, and they have access to a lot of different film and TV, and they make their own film and TV. So the low subscription rate and maximizing, if you like, economies of scale through globalization, exploitative. Making their own TV and films and protecting their own IP and so on and so forth, and generating all kinds of other extra business, explorative. For me, true masters of ambidexterity. I used to talk about Amazon being ambidextrous, but I find them more problematic to label because they have success and failure. And I would say the core of their business is much more exploitative. And then they have areas that are explorative, so they're doing it in a different way because of things like Amazon Prime and stuff like this. But Netflix is not my great example to say this is an ambidextrous organization that is dealing with sustainability and is achieving sustainable development goals. It's not my example. I don't have that perfect example, unfortunately. But they could be, but I don't work for Netflix. I wish I could get access. I'd love to know what they do on the inside. It'd be a fascinating piece of work to kind of do. One day, I'll find my way into Netflix and speak to somebody senior, see what's going on, and see if they could reflect on their own practices in this ambidextrous kind of discussion. That'd be really good. So this idea of exploiting, you've got efficiency versus flexibility, or I might word it, efficiency and flexibility, stability and adaptation, short term and the long term. It's all in. You could argue, is it feasible or realistic, which is absolutely fair to do. But I would argue it is essential. If we're ever going to get these SDGs done, we're ever going to finish them, we're ever going to achieve them, we're going to stop the planet from dying in effect, then we have to. And that's my kind of thoughts there. So the third dimension is responsible leadership. And it's a incredibly broad topic. I've put some definitions in there. This idea of ethics, values, and emphasis on stakeholders, serving and caring for others. It brings a whole new level into what is going on. It's argued to be essentially increasing long-term sustainability of businesses in response to negative impacts like the environment's destruction of habitats, poor working conditions, and I would say all the other sustainable development goals that are going on. And it's argued that there's an incurring of costs. To do all these things, it's going to cost a lot to the business. So it's essential almost to find alternative ways of thinking. So the one I'm doing at the moment, the piece of research I'm working on, trying to drive towards, is finding somehow almost grant money, whether it comes from the government or somebody else, to feed into the world of SMEs so that they don't have to feel the full burden of the cost to shift their practices to much more sustainable ones. And I'm trying to find a bridge between the two. This has been my mission since I joined Oxford Brookes, is to get this particular project off the ground. So perhaps there are three polar opposites to contend with. So it adds even more depth. So to explore this paradox, by the way, I'm getting towards the end of my presentation for those that have been locked in for the ride. So the implementation of delivery responsible management education to achieve SDGs are by their very nature paradoxical. That is one of my key arguments. It's one that I think is important to accept. For people who do not think about it and they think about it in a more linear way, I don't think they will achieve as much success. The application of organisational ambidexterity, I think, is a great one, but it's not a normal one. I really am doing something unusual with that particular theory in this particular situation. I think my research that's getting published is starting to accept the connection, but it has been a long road for that to happen. Analysing ambidexterity is a complicated juxtaposition, and the sustainability paradox could be argued to be insurmountable, and that could be the greatest problem of all, is that we will not achieve sustainable development goals because just simply too difficult. But we are at the point where we're not talking about change anymore. We're at the point where action is far more important than anything else. Management education, we can start here and feed into the future, but it's not just about, for me, the students that we teach. It's the other stakeholders, it's the business community, it's the business engagement. That's where I feel our responsibility can go much wider afield, which is why with some of these great projects we do, Anapama, is that I have that SDG lining within our projects, because I'm really trying to share the mission and share the desire to improve business and society there. And with this hidden curriculum, we can be a part of the problem, but we can also be a part of the solution, and getting people on board with that. So in terms of leadership, it's food for thought. It's something I think about on a day-to-day basis almost. You've got traditional versus modern, classic theory, and I've worded it as alternative because I think there's a need for alternative. Can we embrace a paradox? What are the other related issues with that? And what does this really look like for leaders on a day-to-day basis? I think if people take a step back and realise what conflicting, complex issues they deal with and apply a lens of paradox, doesn't have to be ambidexterity, could just be a general one. They could perhaps look at the way they do their work in a different way and realise that that's feeding into how they manage and they lead with their staff. The different contexts are hugely important, of course, which kind of sector you work in, and so on and so forth. So there's that big question at the end. Where on earth next? Where do we go from here? And will we ever get there? That's got kind of philosophical question to kind of almost finish on. So these are my concluding thoughts. We still face one of the greatest world challenges. And sort of disappointingly, from a personal point of view, we've not really got anywhere. It's kind of, we're doing all right, but if you imagine that that's the whole thing, we've got to about here, I think, and we're kind of way off getting on course with what we need to be. Normative approaches, I'm going to word it in a different way to what I've got here, don't work. They're not working. They have to change. Perhaps we need greater diversity in thinking approaches. I say perhaps, again, I'll word it in a different way. I think we definitely do. Education has a very crucial role as a business in a sector that feeds into other businesses and sectors. But I come back to this thing about leadership. It's how shall I word it? I say it to my students, it's a horrible time to be a leader. It's why leaders get paid more money. There's incredible complexity to deal with. So they deserve to be paid more money because it's painful. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to kind of sort out. There's a lot to manage, whether it's balancing transactional versus transformational, which is difficult enough, and then sustainable development, and then all these other issues, and then Omicron, and then using technology as a part of your business compared to when we didn't. There's so much going on. It's such a different time for leaders going out there into the workplace. Not impossible, but there's a lot to learn to gain the sort of high quality skills to succeed. And then I've put my little disclaimer at the bottom. Please do take into consideration that my perspectives are heavily dictated by UK context. Conversations like this are great because I can feed in more diversity and I speak with lots of people in different places, but I am British. I have mainly lived in the UK most of my life, and therefore I'm going to word it in a negative way, but it's hopefully it makes sense. I am poisoned by the situation that I've been brought up in, so I'm skewed by my views, which means I'm always willing to hear thoughts and opinions from elsewhere, especially if you think it might be a little bit crazy. So that's me done. Anapana. Over. Questions, thoughts, feed in.
Such a brilliant presentation, like always. And Simon, before I go into more serious things, this whole thing about being a leader at this point being so challenging, and I'm sure our dean will completely agree with you. Just when you think you've got one thing sorted, the Omicron happens. So it's really, really a tough time to be in these days. So wonderful lecture, and I think this whole debate, and have I lost the window? Am I still visible? Just a second. Yeah. So this whole debate about this, when you are on one side, you're supposed to explore new options. At the other time, you're supposed to work as a transactional leader, and then same time you have to do a transformation. It becomes so challenging for any individual, not just leaders. I always learn so much from you, and I always take back so many thinking points. And I'm sure all our students are also, and they're most of the students who've logged in. So I was unnecessarily getting apprehensive. At any point of time, we had more than 200 students participating, and we even crossed 220 students. So just your word gets us so much audience, Simon. And I'm sure the dean would like to say something.
You're very kind, Anupam, by the way.
No, I'm sure the dean will completely agree that it is so challenging to be a leader these days. He faces so many challenges. Just when he gets everything sorted out, the Omicron happens. So
there's always something going on, isn't there? I mean, the layers and layers and layers. Not to try and put students off going into these types of roles, but I have a more appreciation all the time of what sort of senior people are dealing with, and I have a lot of respect for people who deal with it in a really wonderful way and still maintain their sort of people focus and still maintain a particular style that keeps in mind everything that's going on. Those are the ones that I'm inspired most by. These keep working through the system somehow, despite all these complexities and challenges going on. I'm very lucky to be working with quite a large team actually at Brookes. It's a very collegial team, and despite lots of challenges that are going on, there's a lot of coming together, which is I've really sort of learnt from, latched into, and very impressed by so far.
Simon, our dean, we are very fortunate to have our dean who I find is so peaceful, and somebody, despite so many things happening around him. Some of us, we can't even imagine or know. He's always very peaceful. He's always sitting like a Buddha there in his office. And we all admire his open door policy. So any one of us can walk in, including the students, into his office and are sure, even if he doesn't have an immediate solution, he'll always give you a very patient hearing. I think that also speaks a lot about leadership.
Oh, definitely. I think the way you treat people has a huge impact. How you interact, how you do the basics of things like listening. I consider it to be the basics, but I'm not sure other leaders do. But yeah, absolutely, because it can build a bond of trust that can last a lot longer when you hit the challenges compared to one that's quite conflicting and sort of with a relationship that's, you know, sort of you're unsure whether you can ask a question, you're unsure whether you can push something forward. So yeah, absolutely, it's a great thing to have.
Absolutely. Sir, would you like to say something?
Oh, thank you so very much, Dr. Anupama. I was just listening to Dr. Simon. I was very touched by his comments also, and I am extremely thankful. Simon, you must have seen, I told you today, despite of being the holiday, just because of knowing that you are going to be here, we could see a lot of participants here, and number of people are watching you live on YouTube also.
Yes.
So thank you so very much for being there, and it's a pleasure to welcome you. As I have told you, I just pray to Almighty, the moment situation is conducive, everything is under control, we would like to see you in India sometime. Thank you so very much for being there.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and hopefully, yeah, fingers crossed. I'm hoping that these travel possibilities are going to happen, not just for me, but for the students as well.
You are absolutely right, Dr. Smith. Actually, I am a firm believer, and I believe, despite of all your strategic planning and everything, whatsoever is going to happen in this great word of Almighty, it's going to take its own way. So you're absolutely right, but we should be always positive and optimistic about, and that's what we are. And the way things are now moving in India also, you know, we are the biggest democracy, and we have a population equivalent to population of 80 plus countries. And despite of that fact, the public very responsibly this time they accepted the vaccination, and as a result, you must be knowing 175 crore people out of 135 crore people are there, and 175 crore doses are already being given. 75% people are already vaccinated totally. So, I mean, if we behave responsibly like this, I'm very sure very soon this problem will be eradicated. And that is what is happening. So, and otherwise also, Dr. Smith, I feel now we have to live with it. I mean, this pandemic may be over, but with the disease called COVID, we have to now live continuously. It may take in, shape of a very simple disease, whatever, after finding out the cure, but we have to live with it.
Yeah, it's here to stay, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So we can close it, Dr. Anupama?
Yes. So with the permission of the Dean, and thank you so much, Dr. Simon. And I'll leave the last word to I'll leave the last word to Manav. Manav, over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Simon. Just an echo of my faculties here that you talked about and drawn attention on focus of such important and relevant topics on sustainability. Something I feel of paramount importance in the recent events in the light of them. And rather than the conventional business teaching of profiteering and growth. So kind of this shift from people or planet or profit to people and planet and profit. And something I felt that such a natural outlook. And just to put a new spin on the theory of sustainability, a perspective that makes so much sense and yet not commonly talked about, and about paradox and making the hidden curriculum not so hidden anymore. And about the ambidextrality and the two paradox working in polar opposites in tandem, if I quote you there. And in the end, I would say that leaving with us with such a weighing question of are we irresponsible in teaching responsible sustainability? Something that I've been pondering in the back of my head throughout the event. So I'm sure, sir, you have shifted the perspective of many young future managers here. And we wish you all the very best in all your future endeavors and the journey at Oxford Brookes. And on behalf of all present here, I express our deepest gratitude and accolade towards Dr. Simon for taking out time and being part of this acclaimed lecture series and kind of ending the series with such a huge bang. And just thank you so much, sir.
The pleasure's all mine. I'm delighted to be sort of the last one almost. Yeah, it's great.
I'd like to also inform, sir, that Amity Business School will also be organizing the 7th Global Leadership Research Conference on Leading in the New Reality, Insight into Action, which will be held from 16th to 18th February. The GLRC 2022 is a platform where you'll witness and interact with managers, scholars, researchers, academics, industry experts who come together, share their collective experience on the groundbreaking outcomes on research across diverse management domains and their subsequent contributions to building a theory in the field of management. So I hope to envisage you all there. Thank you so much. Thanks once again.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Simon. See you.
Thank you.
If I may say, see you in MILS 22 after GLRC 22. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.